Ethan Cole lived paycheck to paycheck in a world that had forgotten he existed. At 37, he was the guy who fixed broken things during the day and delivered packages at night. The single dad to 8-year-old Mia had been barely keeping their heads above water ever since his wife Hannah died of heart complications 2 years ago. The medical bills had drained their savings. The funeral costs had drained everything else. Now standing in their small apartment hallway, he pressed the last piece of masking tape onto the room for rent sign, his hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. $200 a month would cover Mia's school supplies and maybe a few decent meals. It wasn't much, but it was their last resort. He stepped back, examining his work. The handwritten sign looked desperate even to him. Would anyone decent even respond? The thought of bringing a stranger into their small sanctuary made his stomach twist. But the past due notices piling up on his kitchen counter left no alternatives. Down the hall, Mrs. Chen from 2B peeked out her door, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. She'd been watching him more carefully since Hannah died, as though single fatherhood might be contagious. Mia's bedroom door remained closed as it had most evenings since the funeral. Inside, he knew she was surrounded by drawings of their family when it was still whole. Hannah's smile captured in crayon frozen in time. His daughter spoke less these days, her eyes carrying a heaviness no 8-year-old should know. How would she feel about sharing their already cramped space with someone else, but what choice did they have? The alternative was downsizing to an even smaller apartment away from her school and the few friends she'd managed to keep. The heater kicked on with a painful groan, another thing in this apartment that worked only when it wanted to. Like his life. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool wall, allowing himself exactly 10 seconds of despair before straightening up again. 10 seconds was all he could afford. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected knock. Ethan opened the door to find a young woman standing in the hallway dressed in simple jeans and a plain sweater that somehow looked deliberate rather than budget conscious. She was around 20, with intelligent eyes that held his gaze directly. "I'm here about the room," she said, her voice softer than expected, but with an underlying confidence. "I'm Anna. I'm studying art at the community college. I need somewhere peaceful to work. No helicopter parents inspecting the accommodations. No lists of demands or questions about laundry facilities. Just a quiet student with cash in hand and a portfolio tucked under her arm." She glanced past him into the apartment, her eyes pausing on Mia's backpack propped against the wall, a half-finished drawing of a bird peeking out of the front pocket. "Is that a crane?" Anna asked, her interest seemingly genuine. Ethan turned to look. "My daughter's. She's been trying to learn origami from YouTube videos, but it's not going well. I'm not much help either." A small smile crossed Anna's face. "I could teach her if that would be okay. I've been folding paper cranes since I was 6. Before Ethan could respond, Mia appeared in the hallway behind him, drawn by the unfamiliar voice. She hovered at the edge of visibility, her small fingers clutching the doorframe. Her eyes moved from her father to the stranger, wary but curious. Anna crouched down slightly, meeting Mia at eye level, without the condescension adults often showed children. "Did you know that in Japan there's a legend that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you get a wish?" Mia shook her head, taking a half step forward despite herself. "I could show you how to make them properly if you'd like." Anna's voice was gentle but not artificially sweet. She treated Mia like a person, not a child to be managed. That simple interaction sealed the decision before Ethan's brain had fully processed their options. The rent money would help, yes, but the spark of interest he'd just witnessed in his daughter's eyes, the first in months, was worth more than any dollar amount. Anna moved in that evening with surprisingly little: 2 suitcases, her art supplies, and a small box of books. She asked to use Ethan's old laptop instead of bringing her own. "Mine crashed," she'd explained with a sheepish smile. "College budget, you know." The whispers started immediately. Mrs. Chen made pointed comments about young girls these days and inappropriate living arrangements while collecting her mail. Dave from the delivery company was less subtle during their shared shift. "Dude, you got a college girl living with you. What's your daughter gonna think?" The questions followed him everywhere. The grocery store, the gas station even. Mia's parent-teacher conferences. Single dad renting to a young woman. The math looked wrong to everyone who cared to judge. But Anna paid on time, kept her space clean, and most importantly, she'd somehow coaxed Mia out of her shell. That should have been enough. Within a week, the apartment felt different. Ethan came home from his night delivery shift to find Anna and Mia at the kitchen table, surrounded by precisely folded paper cranes in various sizes. Mia looked up at him with the first genuine smile he'd seen in forever. Dad, Anna taught me how to make the head right. See, my birds don't look like potatoes anymore. Anna sat beside her patient and encouraging her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She nodded at Ethan with that same quiet confidence he'd noticed the first day. She'd found his extra set of keys hanging by the door and fixed the sticky lock that had been driving him crazy for months. She never complained about the thin walls or the heater that only worked when you kicked it twice. She was perfect. Too perfect. That is when he started noticing things. Little inconsistencies that nagged at the back of his mind. Her clothes were simple but well made, the kind of basic pieces that cost more than they appeared to. Her art supplies weren't student grade but professional quality. When Mia accidentally spilled juice on Anna's backpack, the leather absorbed it without staining. The kind of leather that cost more than Ethan made in a month. And then there was the silver bracelet she always wore, catching the light wrong sometimes. He first glimpsed the engraved logo one morning as she reached across the table for the salt. The distinctive V and H intertwined in an elegant design he would recognize anywhere. Voss Holdings, the corporate giant that had restructured him out of his warehouse supervisor job 18 months ago. No severance, no explanation. Just a form letter thanking him for his service and a security escort out of the building he'd worked in for 6 years. The job loss had come just as Hannah's symptoms had started worsening. Without health insurance, the medical bills mounted faster than their savings could handle. Would Hannah still be alive if he'd been able to afford the specialists she needed? The question haunted his nights, and now the symbol of everything that had gone wrong was glinting innocently on his tenant's wrist. But Anna couldn't be connected to Voss Holdings, could she? It was probably just costume jewelry, something picked up at a mall kiosk without understanding its significance. The alternative made no sense. Why would anyone connected to a billion-dollar corporation be living in his rundown apartment, folding paper cranes with his daughter? At Mia's school, things were changing too. Her teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, caught Ethan after pickup one afternoon, her expression puzzled, but pleased. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to talk to you about Mia's family tree project. It's quite remarkable. The detail work on the folded elements is unlike anything I've seen from a third grader. Has she been getting help?" Ethan's confusion must have shown on his face. Family tree project. She hadn't mentioned any project, Mrs. Abernathy continued. She told the class that your friend was teaching her origami techniques. The presentation was so impressive that several parents asked if we could incorporate more three-dimensional art into our assignments. That evening, Ethan watched from the doorway as Mia proudly showed Anna her A-plus project on a family tree where each member was represented by an origami figure. Hannah was a delicate crane at the top of the tree, positioned as though in flight. Mia had drawn a small heart next to it. "Mom's watching over us," she explained to Anna, who nodded seriously. "I think that's exactly right," Anna said, helping Mia place the project carefully on her bookshelf. "People we love are never really gone. They just take different forms." The words hit Ethan with unexpected force, lodging somewhere beneath his ribs. Who was this young woman who spoke about loss with such quiet understanding, who taught his daughter to transform grief into something beautiful? And why did it feel like she was hiding something behind those thoughtful eyes? Later that week, Mrs. Abernathy invited parents to an evening art showcase featuring selected student projects. Ethan's delivery schedule made attendance impossible, a reality that brought the familiar weight of parental failure pressing down on his shoulders. "I can't reschedule my shift," he explained to Mia at breakfast, watching her face fall, despite her attempt to hide it. The disappointment in her eyes was a pain he knew too well. "I could go," Anna offered from the sink where she was washing her cereal bowl. "If that would be okay with both of you. I don't have classes Thursday evenings." Mia's face brightened immediately. "Can you, Anna?" "Please," Ethan hesitated. It was one thing to have Anna helping around the apartment, but sending her to represent him at school functions felt like crossing a line he hadn't defined yet. What would the other parents think? What would the teachers assume about their living arrangement? But watching his daughter's hopeful expression, he found he couldn't say no. The relief and excitement on Mia's face was worth whatever uncomfortable questions might follow. And wasn't this exactly why he needed help in the first place? To fill the gaps he couldn't cover alone. That night, Ethan rushed home from his delivery shift, arriving just as Anna and Mia were returning from the school showcase. Mia burst through the door, practically vibrating with excitement. Dad, Mrs. Abernathy put my project right in the middle of the display, and Principal Wilson asked me questions about origami history that Anna helped me answer. And Jesse's mom wants to know if I can teach Jesse how to make cranes too. Anna followed behind carrying Mia's backpack and wearing a quiet smile. She caught Ethan's eye over Mia's head with a look that said, she was amazing. For just a moment, they were united in their pride like real parents. The thought startled him. When had he started thinking of Anna as anything more than a tenant? And why didn't the idea trouble him as much as it should? As Mia continued chattering about the event, Ethan noticed Anna absently twisting the silver bracelet on her wrist. Under the kitchen light, the Voss Holdings logo was unmistakable. Not costume jewelry then. The question that had been nagging him demanded an answer. Who exactly had he invited into their home? Thank you for going with her, he said when Mia finally raced off to get ready for bed. I know it's not what you signed up for when you rented a room. Anna shook her head. I enjoyed it. Mia is special. She sees the world differently than most kids her age. That origami crane of her mother. She trailed off, then looked directly at him. You're doing a good job with her, Ethan. Not everyone could raise such a thoughtful child alone. There was something in her tone that went beyond simple compliment, a depth of understanding that felt personal. Before he could respond, she excused herself to work on a college assignment, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers. That weekend, a rare rainstorm kept them all indoors. The ancient heater struggled against the damp chill, requiring Anna's now expert double kick to sputter reluctantly to life. Mia spread her origami paper across the living room floor, teaching her father what Anna had taught her. You have to be patient with the folds, Dad. Anna says that paper remembers mistakes. Ethan's clumsy fingers produced something that looked more like a crushed soda can than a bird bringing giggles from Mia and a warm smile from Anna, who sat sketching on the couch. For a few hours, the apartment felt like a home again, filled with laughter and creative chaos rather than the heavy silence that had defined it since Hannah's death. As the evening wound down, Anna offered to make hot chocolate. Ethan noticed her staring out the kitchen window with sudden intensity, her body gone rigid. Following her gaze, he spotted a black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted, an engine running despite the late hour. When he turned back, Anna had composed herself, but a new tension lined her shoulders. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan heard movement in the kitchen. Padding quietly down the hallway, he found Anna sitting at the table with his old laptop open before her. She was inserting something into the USB port, something small and red. When she noticed him standing in the doorway, she closed the laptop quickly, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Making tea, she said, gesturing to the kettle on the stove. Want some, but Ethan had seen enough to know something wasn't right. The flash of red, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she pushed the laptop aside, the fear that had flickered across her face before she controlled it. What are you really doing, Anna? He wanted to ask. Who are you running from? Why are you here in this apartment with us? But the questions remained unspoken. Something told him he might not be ready for the answers. The next morning, Anna left early for a weekend art workshop. With Mia still asleep and the apartment quiet, Ethan found himself standing outside Anna's door. He'd never entered her room without permission before respecting her privacy as she respected theirs. But the memory of that red flash, the black SUV, and the fear in her eyes pushed him forward. The room was neat and sparsely decorated. Her clothes hung with precise spacing in the small closet. Her art supplies were organized by type and color on the desk. Nothing seemed out of place or suspicious. He was about to leave when his foot caught on the strap of her portfolio case, sending it sliding across the floor. Several sketches spilled out along with a small, leather-bound journal. Ethan knelt to gather the papers, intending only to return them to the case. But the top sketch froze him in place. It was a detailed rendering of the Voss Holdings headquarters, the building where he'd worked for 6 years. The next was a portrait of a stern-faced older man he recognized from company newsletters. Richard Voss himself, the CEO who had never once visited the warehouse division during Ethan's tenure. Heart-pounding, Ethan continued through the sketches. Detailed drawings of chemical storage tanks labeled Raven Lake Project. Architectural renderings of water treatment facilities. And most disturbing, a sketch of himself from before the layoffs, standing outside the warehouse with several coworkers. Their faces were circled in red ink with notes in the margins. Potential witnesses, all terminated within 48 hours of inspection report filing. The leather journal provided the final piece of the puzzle. The first page contained a name written in precise handwriting, Anna Voss, and below it a mission statement of sorts, Project Raven Lake, Evidence Collection, and Witness Identification. The room seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. Anna wasn't just connected to Voss Holdings. She was a Voss, the daughter of the man whose decisions had destroyed Ethan's stable life, leading to the financial strain that had prevented Hannah from getting the treatment she needed. And now this woman, this heiress, was living in his apartment, forming a bond with his daughter, all while investigating what exactly. He heard Mia's bedroom door open down the hall and quickly returned everything to Anna's portfolio, sliding it back into position. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Was Anna spying on him? Was this all an elaborate scheme to ensure his silence about something he might have witnessed at the warehouse? But he'd been a supervisor, not an executive. He hadn't been privy to any corporate secrets. Had he? Throughout the day, Ethan moved through his weekend routine with Mia on autopilot, his thoughts circling back to Anna and the disturbing discovery. By evening, he decided confrontation was the only way forward. He would demand answers as soon as she returned, even if it meant asking her to leave. Mia's safety had to come first. But when Anna walked through the door that evening, she was different. Her usual composed demeanor was fractured, her eyes scanning the apartment with barely concealed anxiety. She carried a newspaper tucked under her arm, the financial section open to a headline about Voss Holdings stock hitting an all-time high following the successful completion of the Raven Lake development. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, studying her face. Anna's fingers went to her silver bracelet, twisting it unconsciously. "Just tired from the workshop," she said, the lie hanging awkwardly between them. "Is Mia already asleep?" The tenderness with which she asked about his daughter complicated Ethan's anger. Whatever game Anna was playing, her affection for Mia seemed genuine. Or was that part of the act too? How much of the past few weeks had been real? He needed more information before confronting her. If Anna was investigating something at Voss Holdings, something potentially dangerous, charging in without understanding could put them all at risk. The opportunity came 3 days later at Peterson's Market. Ethan was counting coupons at checkout, calculating whether he could afford the name brand cereal Mia had asked for when his card was declined. Again. He felt the familiar burn of shame creep up his neck as the cashier sighed impatiently. "I'm sorry," he told her, already removing items from his bags. "Can you take off the—" "I've got it," Anna said quietly, appearing beside him with a platinum credit card that she must have been concealing in her simple wallet. The cashier's entire demeanor changed. The same woman who had been tapping her fingers impatiently suddenly became deferential, almost servile. "Of course, miss. Right away." Anna's card processed the $237 grocery bill with the casual ease of someone for whom money was never a real concern. The other customers in line stared, and Ethan felt their judgment like a physical weight. The single dad who couldn't afford groceries, saved by his young female tenant's platinum card. Walking home in silence, carrying bags that Anna had paid for, Ethan finally asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Who are you, really?" Anna stopped walking, staring at the sidewalk. For a long moment, she said nothing, her fingers unconsciously touching that silver bracelet. "I'm exactly who I said I am," she whispered finally. "I'm just not exactly who you think I am." The half-answer hung in the air between them. Ethan waited, giving her space to continue or retreat. Part of him already knew what she would say, had pieced it together from the evidence in her room and the platinum card that bore the same logo as her bracelet. But he needed to hear it from her. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Anna knocked softly on Ethan's bedroom door. Her face was pale, her composure finally cracking completely. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely audible. She sat on the edge of his bed, looking younger than her 20 years, and told him the truth that shattered his world all over again. "My name is Anna Voss. My father owns Voss Holdings." The air left Ethan's lungs in a rush. "Your father, I know what his company did to you. I know about the layoffs, the timing, everything." Tears started streaming down her face. "I found your name in the employment records. Hannah Cole listed as your emergency contact. And then I found her death certificate." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You investigated me. I investigated my father's company. You were just on collateral damage I discovered along the way." The room seemed to spin around him. This girl, this young woman his daughter had come to love, was the child of the man who had destroyed their lives, the billionaire whose corporate decisions had taken away Ethan's job, his insurance, his ability to save his wife. Why? His voice was barely audible. Why are you here? Anna reached for the old laptop on his dresser, the one she'd been using for weeks. With shaking hands, she opened it and pulled out the red USB drive he'd seen her hide. Because of this, the drive was labeled in neat handwriting, Project Raven Lake, Do Not Disclose. What is it proof? She said simply. Proof that Raven Lake wasn't just corporate downsizing. It was deliberate contamination of the water supply to drive down property values for a real estate acquisition. 17 people died from the contaminated water. The layoffs were just cover to eliminate witnesses who might have talked. Ethan's world tilted. 17 people. Anna nodded, her face pale, including Hannah Cole. The heart complications she died from, they were caused by prolonged exposure to industrial chemicals that my father's company dumped into the municipal water system. The USB drive sat between them like a loaded gun. Hannah didn't just die because I lost my job, Ethan said slowly, the horrifying reality sinking in. She died because your father poisoned her, yes. Outside, a black SUV had been parked across the street for the past hour. Anna had noticed it first, her body tensing in a way that spoke of long-practiced fear. They know I have it, she whispered. They know I'm here. And now they know about you and Mia. As if summoned by her words, the SUV's doors opened. 3 men in expensive suits stepped out, their movements coordinated and purposeful. They weren't just coming for Anna. They weren't planning to leave witnesses. The knock came at exactly 9:47 p.m., not the polite tap of neighbors or delivery drivers, but the sound of authority that expected immediate compliance. Ethan looked at Anna, whose face had gone completely white. The USB drive was still in her trembling hands. Mr. Cole, a voice called through the door. We'd like to speak with you about your tenant. Ethan's protective instincts kicked in. Whatever Anna had done, whatever secret she carried, Mia was upstairs sleeping. His daughter's safety came first. Just a minute, he called back, then whispered urgently to Anna, hide that drive. Now. Anna shoved the USB back into his laptop and snapped it closed. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to bring this to your home. Too late for apologies, he thought, moving toward the door. He opened it to find 3 men in perfectly tailored suits, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Behind them, and neighbors were peeking through curtains and cracking doors open, drawn by the expensive cars and obvious drama. The man in the center was older, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. His eyes swept past Ethan dismissively before settling on Anna, who had appeared in the hallway. Anna, it's time to come home. I am home, she said quietly. The man's laugh was cold. This is what you call home, he gestured around Ethan's modest apartment with obvious disgust. A cramped rental with a... His eyes found Ethan again. Maintenance worker, one of the younger men smirked. Sir, maybe we should explain to Mr. Cole exactly who he's been harboring. But Anna stepped forward, her chin raised with surprising defiance. No, I'll explain. She looked directly at the growing crowd of neighbors, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. My name is Anna Voss. My father is Richard Voss, CEO of Voss Holdings. And I stole classified documents, proving that his company murdered 17 innocent people. The statement hit like a physical blow. Mrs. Chen gasped audibly. Dave from the delivery service whistled low. Richard Voss's composure cracked for just a moment. Anna, you don't know what you're, Hannah Cole. Anna continued, her voice growing stronger. Maria Santos, David Kim, James Patterson, 17 names on a list of people who died from contaminated water that your company deliberately dumped to drive down property values. Ethan felt the world spinning around him. Not only had Anna confirmed that Hannah's death was murder, she was announcing it to the entire neighborhood. You have no proof of these allegations, Richard said smoothly, but his eyes were scanning the apartment, looking for something specific. Actually, I do. That's when Ethan realized what Anna was doing. She wasn't just confronting her father, she was creating witnesses. Every neighbor who'd come out to gawk at the expensive cars was now listening to a confession of corporate murder. And some of them, he noticed, were recording on their phones. Richard noticed the cameras too. His mask of controlled authority began to slip. Everyone needs to go back inside, one of his security men said loudly. This is a private family matter. Is it Mrs. Chen called out? Because she just said you people killed 17 folks. That ain't private. Dave stepped forward, his delivery company uniform making him look oddly official despite his youth. Sir, if what she's saying is true, we got a right to know. Some of us drink that same water. The crowd was growing as other apartments emptied, words spreading through the building. Anna Voss, billionaire's daughter, living in their building, accusing her father of mass murder. Richard's control was evaporating by the second. Anna, get in the car. Now, no. You're 20 years old. You're my daughter. You'll do as I say. I'm 20 years old, Anna repeated, stepping closer to Ethan. Which means I'm an adult who can choose where to live. And I choose here. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the handwritten rental receipt Ethan had given her on her first day. This is my legal residence. This is my rental agreement. And this man, she gestured to Ethan, has been more of a father to me in 3 weeks than you've been in 20 years. The crowd murmured approval. Someone started clapping. Richard's face flushed with rage and humiliation. You think this poverty-stricken nobody can protect you from me? This nobody, Ethan said quietly, speaking for the first time, knows exactly who you are, Richard Voss. He pulled his phone from his pocket, held it up so everyone could see the screen. I've been recording this entire conversation. Every threat, every admission, every word. The blood drained from Richard's face. And so has she. Ethan nodded toward Mrs. Chen, who was holding her tablet high, the red recording light clearly visible. And him, Dave waved his phone. And me, another neighbor, stepped forward. Within seconds, a dozen phones were visible in the crowd, all recording, all capturing Richard Voss's meltdown, all in real time. You can't use any of this, Richard sputtered. Attorney-client privilege, family privacy laws, don't apply to confessions of murder, Anna said calmly, especially not when they're made in public. From upstairs, a small voice called down, Daddy, what's happening? Mia appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, holding one of the paper cranes Anna had taught her to fold. The sight of the 8-year-old girl seemed to break something in Richard Voss. Here was innocence, the kind of childhood Anna had never been allowed to have, the kind of family he'd destroyed with his corporate greed. Please, Anna whispered, her voice cracking. Just let me stay. Let me do the right thing. For once. Richard looked around at the cameras, the witnesses, the evidence of his empire crumbling in real time. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is, Anna replied, because tomorrow morning I'm walking into the FBI field office with everything I have. And tonight, everyone here heard you try to stop me. As Richard and his men retreated to their expensive cars, Anna collapsed against Ethan's shoulder, finally allowing herself to cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I brought this to your family. Ethan looked at Mia, still clutching her paper crane, still trusting him to keep her safe. You didn't bring this to my family, he said quietly. You became part of my family. And family protects each other. The cameras were still recording. The truth was finally free. By morning, the world would change forever. Mrs. Chen approached her earlier suspicion, replaced by fierce protectiveness. You three come with me now, she ordered. My apartment tonight. They might come back. Dave joined them, already on his phone. I'm calling my cousin at the police department. We need officers here. And I'm getting the guys from my delivery route to take shifts watching the building. Other neighbors crowded around, offering support, protection, solidarity. The community Ethan had barely noticed in his grief had suddenly mobilized, forming an unexpected shield around his unlikely family. As they gathered Mia and the laptop containing the precious evidence, Ethan caught Anna's eye. In the chaos and fear, there was something else there too, a dawning realization that they weren't alone anymore. That in exposing the worst of humanity, they had somehow discovered the best of it as well. Outside, the expensive black cars pulled away, but their menace lingered. This was just the beginning. Richard Voss wouldn't surrender billions and freedom without a fight. But tonight, at least, the truth had found its voice. And it had sounded remarkably like a 20-year-old art student with a paper rental receipt and the courage to stand her ground. The battle ahead would be brutal. Corporate lawyers, media manipulation, perhaps even more direct threats. But looking at his neighbors rallying around them, at Mia's small hand clasped trustingly in Anna's, at the determined set of Anna's jaw, as she clutched the laptop containing her evidence, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since Hannah's diagnosis. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a drowning man grasping at straws, but the solid, grounded hope that comes from knowing you're not fighting alone. That justice, while never guaranteed, was at least possible. As they crossed the hallway to Mrs. Chen's apartment, Mia looked up at Anna with serious eyes. Is the bad man going to come back? Anna knelt down to Mia's level, the way she had that first day at their door. Maybe. But here's what I know about bad men. They're strongest when people are scared and alone. And thanks to you and your dad, I'm neither of those things anymore. Mia considered this, then held out her paper crane. I made this one for you. It's not perfect, but I put a wish inside it. Anna accepted the delicate paper bird with reverence. What did you wish for? Mia shook her head solemnly. Can't tell or it won't come true, but I think it's already starting to work. As the door closed behind them, securing them in the temporary sanctuary of Mrs. Chen's apartment, the video of Richard Voss's confrontation was already spreading across social media. By morning, news vans would line their street. By noon, the FBI would arrive to collect Anna's evidence. The wheels of justice, so long stalled, were finally beginning to turn. But that night, in the quiet aftermath of revelation, three people who had been strangers weeks earlier huddled together, bound by truth, by courage, and by the unexpected family they had become in the crucible of corporate crime. The story was just beginning. The battle for justice would be long, the path uncertain, but they would walk it together, step by step, fold by fold, like 1,000 paper cranes taking flight toward a wish that suddenly seemed possible. The morning after Richard Voss's confrontation in the hallway of their apartment building, Ethan woke to the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Mrs. Chen's spare bedroom, where they'd spent the night, faced away from the street, but even from here, the growing commotion outside was unmistakable. The videos had gone viral overnight. Billionaire CEO confronted by whistleblower daughter, corporate murder exposed in a cramped apartment hallway. Their private tragedy had become public spectacle. Anna was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the makeshift bed where Mia still slept. The laptop containing the Project Raven Lake evidence sat open in front of her, her expression tense as she scanned news headlines. It's everywhere, she said quietly as Ethan joined her. Every major network, social media, all of it. She angled the screen so he could see. Their buildings surrounded by news vans, reporters clustered on the sidewalk, police creating a perimeter to keep them back. His phone, silenced overnight, showed dozens of missed calls and messages. How are you feeling about that? Ethan asked, studying her face for signs of regret or fear. Anna considered the question seriously. Scared, relieved, guilty that I've dragged you and Mia into this, but mostly. Her fingers brushed across the USB drive that had set everything in motion. Mostly, I feel like I can finally breathe. After carrying this secret for so long, it's like putting down a weight I didn't even realize was crushing me. From the doorway, Mrs. Chen appeared with a tray of steaming tea. You both drink? She ordered more than offered. FBI called my phone. They coming in 1 hour. Want to meet somewhere private, not at building with all cameras. Anna's eyes widened. They called you. How did they get your number, Mrs.? Chen snorted dismissively. I called them. My nephew works for Justice Department. I tell him what happened, he connect me to right people. She set the tray down with surprising gentleness. You think old lady just make dumplings? I was democracy activist in China before coming here. I know how powerful men work. They crush truth unless truth has protectors. Ethan accepted the tea with newfound respect. The woman he'd known only as his somewhat judgmental neighbor had depths he'd never imagined. Mrs. Chen's transformation from suspicious observer to fierce ally represented something larger happening around them. A community awakening to a threat in their midst, rallying to protect their own. Dave arrived 30 minutes later with fresh clothes for all three of them collected from their apartment. His delivery uniform was replaced by casual clothes, but his expression was all business. Buildings surrounded by media vultures, he reported, but I got some of the guys from my route watching all entrances. Nobody gets in without us knowing. He turned to Anna with unexpected deference. Folks want you to know they believe you. Mrs. Santos from 3C says her husband got sick, same way as Hannah. Bunch of others coming forward too, saying they had symptoms or family members who died with similar problems. The scope of Richard Voss's crime was expanding before their eyes. What had begun as 17 documented deaths might be the tip of a much larger tragedy. Anna received this news with a pained expression, the weight of her father's actions visibly settling on her shoulders. "We need to document all of it," she said, reaching for a notebook. "Every name, every symptom, every timeline. It's not just about evidence anymore. These people deserve to be acknowledged." As she began methodically recording the information Dave provided, Ethan was struck by the transformation in Anna. The composed, somewhat secretive young woman who had rented his spare room was gone, replaced by someone with clear purpose and unexpected strength. In exposing her father's crimes, she seemed to have found her own voice. The FBI arrived exactly as promised. Two agents in unmarked cars meeting them at Mrs. Chen's nephew's law office downtown. They were escorted through a back entrance, avoiding the media that had somehow tracked their movement across the city. Agent Sarah Martinez introduced herself with professional efficiency, her focus immediately on the evidence Anna had gathered. "My team has been investigating Voss Holdings for environmental violations for 3 years, but we've never been able to establish intent or direct knowledge at the executive level." She eyed the USB drive Anna placed on the conference table. "What exactly do you have?" Over the next 4 hours, Anna laid out her case with meticulous precision. Internal emails discussing the contamination. Geological surveys deliberately altered to conceal chemical levels. Financial projections showing the profit to be made by acquiring properties at depressed values once residents fell ill or died. Most damning, her father's signature on documents explicitly acknowledging the acceptable casualty rate as a necessary business externality. "Where did you get access to these files?" Martinez asked, clearly impressed by the thoroughness of the evidence. "I've been collecting them for nearly 2 years," Anna explained. "It started when I found some discarded documents in my father's home office. After that, I created Reasons to Be in the company archives, a school project on corporate history interest in the family business. No one questions the boss's daughter taking an interest. But this," Anna indicated a particular set of files. "This came from the secure server. I had to," she hesitated, glancing at the agents. "I accessed my father's private authentication credentials to retrieve these. I'm aware that could be considered illegal." Martinez exchanged glances with her partner. "Under normal circumstances, yes. But given the nature of the crimes documented, I believe the whistleblower protections will apply here. We'll need to process all of this properly, chain of custody and all that." She turned to Ethan. "And we'll need your testimony as well, Mr. Cole, as both a former employee and—" Her eyes moved to Hannah's name on the list of victims, "and as someone with direct connection to the victims." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Whatever you need. I want them held accountable. All of them." The phrase "all of them" hung in the air. This wasn't just Richard Voss. The documents implicated board members, executives, environmental compliance officers, an entire corporate structure that had valued profit over human lives. As Anna continued working with the agents, Ethan sat with Mia in a small break room adjacent to the conference area. His daughter was handling the chaos with remarkable resilience, but the strain was beginning to show in the shadows under her eyes and the way she clutched her latest paper crane like a talisman. "Are we in trouble, Dad?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan pulled her close, choosing his words carefully. "No, sweetheart. We're helping make sure some bad people can't hurt anyone else. Remember how Mom always said it's important to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard?" Mia nodded against his shoulder. She said, "Brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway." That's exactly what Anna is doing right now. And we're helping her because that's what family does. The word family seemed to reassure Mia in a way nothing else could. In her 8-year-old understanding, if Anna was family, then the chaos around them made sense. You protected family no matter what. Their conversation was interrupted by Agent Martinez, her expression grave. "Mr. Cole, we've just received intelligence that Richard Voss has begun liquidating overseas assets and may be preparing to flee the country. We need to move quickly. I'd like to offer you protective custody while we secure arrest warrants." The reality of their situation crystallized in that moment. Richard Voss wasn't just a corporate criminal. He was a desperate billionaire with unlimited resources and everything to lose. The threat he posed wasn't abstract. It was immediate and potentially deadly. "What exactly does protective custody mean?" Ethan asked, his arm tightening around Mia. "A secure location away from your apartment, round-the-clock security, limited communication with the outside world until we have Voss in custody." Martinez's expression softened slightly as she glanced at Mia. I know it's disruptive, especially for your daughter, but we have reason to believe Voss has hired private security contractors with military backgrounds. These aren't just bodyguards, Mr. Cole. These are professionals who specialize in making problems disappear. The threat didn't need further elaboration. Ethan had seen the cold calculation in Richard Voss's eyes the night before. The man who could dismiss 17 deaths as acceptable casualties wouldn't hesitate to eliminate 3 more obstacles to his freedom. 2 hours later, they were settled in a safe house, a modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburb an hour outside Pittsburgh. Unmarked vehicles patrolled the street. Agents posing as landscapers monitored the perimeter. Inside, the generic furnishings gave the house the impersonal feel of a hotel, but it was secure. For the first time since Anna's revelation, Ethan felt he could breathe freely. That evening, after Mia had claimed one of the bedrooms as her own and fallen into exhausted sleep, Ethan found Anna sitting on the back porch, staring at the night sky. The suburban darkness revealed stars that were never visible from their apartment in the city. "I never meant for this to happen," she said without turning around. "Disrupting your lives this way." Ethan settled into the chair beside her. "Funny thing about that. Our lives were already disrupted. 2 years ago, when your father decided profit margins were more important than people." Anna flinched as though he'd struck her. Ethan immediately regretted the harshness of his words. This wasn't her fault, not really. She was as much a victim of Richard Voss's moral bankruptcy as anyone, just in a different way. "I'm sorry," he said. "That wasn't fair. You're not responsible for what he did." "Aren't I, though, huh? The Voss fortune paid for my education, my comfortable life. I benefited from his crimes every day, even if I didn't know it." There was a question Ethan had been avoiding, but it needed to be asked. "Did you know about Hannah specifically? Before you came to us?" Anna finally turned to face him, her expression stricken. "No, I swear to you, I knew there were deaths, but I didn't connect your name to hers until after I moved in. When I saw the photographs of her in your apartment." She swallowed hard. By then it was already too late. "I was already. Already what?" She looked away again. "Already caring about you both. More than I should." The admission hung in the air between them, neither comfortable acknowledging the complex emotions that had developed during their short time together. They weren't just whistleblower and witness anymore. They had become something else, something without an easy definition. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Agent Martinez arrived with news that the FBI had secured a warrant for all Voss Holdings records related to the Raven Lake project. Anna spent hours on video conference with federal prosecutors, walking them through the evidence she'd gathered. Ethan gave his own statement describing Hannah's illness, the layoffs, the timeline that connected both to the contamination. Mia, bored with being confined to the house, convinced one of the younger agents to help her hang paper cranes in the windows, a touch of familiarity in their temporary home. By evening, the generic safe house had taken on something of their apartment's character, transformed by Mia's boundless creativity and Anna's gentle guidance. While reviewing his testimony with Agent Martinez, Ethan was struck by a realization that had been forming gradually over the past 24 hours. "You've been waiting for this," he said, interrupting her mid-sentence. "You knew someone at Voss was gathering evidence. You were just waiting for them to come forward." The agent's professional mask slipped momentarily. "We had suspicions about the Raven Lake development for years. The pattern of property acquisitions, the unusual health incidents in the area, the mass layoffs that eliminated potential witnesses, it all pointed to environmental crimes, but proving corporate intent requires internal documentation that we couldn't access through conventional means. So Anna did your job for you." Martinez didn't deny it. "Miss Voss had access we could never obtain through legal channels. And as a family member, her testimony carries extraordinary weight with a jury. Is it ideal to rely on a whistleblower? Numb, but sometimes justice requires uncomfortable alliances." The implication was clear. The FBI had been content to let Anna take enormous personal risk gathering evidence they couldn't legally obtain. Now they were happy to use her as the face of their case, knowing a daughter testifying against her father made for compelling courtroom drama. "She could have been killed," Ethan said, anger rising in his voice. "She still could be." Martinez met his gaze steadily. "That's why you're here, Mr. Cole. Not just as a corroborating witness, but because your presence in her life makes it harder for Richard Voss to simply make his daughter disappear. The public is already invested in your story. The single dad and the billionaire's daughter fighting corporate corruption together. It's protection through visibility. The cynicism of this calculation should have been shocking, but Ethan recognized its effectiveness. The viral videos of Richard Voss confronting them at the apartment had transformed what might have been a dry corporate crime story into human drama. The public was watching. The media was watching. Any harm that came to Anna or to Ethan and Mia would immediately raise suspicions that would be impossible to contain. By the third day in the safe house, a routine had begun to form. Mornings were for legal briefings and evidence review. Afternoons, Ethan helped Mia with schoolwork sent over by her teacher, while Anna prepared simple meals in the kitchen, still learning the basics of cooking after a lifetime of hired chefs. Evenings they played board games discovered in a hall closet or watched movies on the secure tablet provided by the FBI. It was almost like a normal family vacation if you ignored the armed agents outside and the world-shaking legal case building around them. The illusion of normalcy shattered on the fourth day when Agent Martinez arrived with new security footage. Richard Voss had been recorded entering the offices of Judge Harold Winters, the federal judge assigned to approve the warrants for the Voss Holdings investigation. "We have to assume he's trying to interfere with the case," Martinez explained grimly. "Judge Winters has a reputation for integrity, but Richard Voss doesn't make social calls." Anna's expression hardened. "He's doing what he always does, looking for leverage. Judge Winters must have something my father can use against him. A financial problem, a family secret something." "You know his playbook well," Martinez observed. "I watched him destroy people my entire life," Anna replied. "It's what he does when threatened." The implications were troubling. If Richard Voss could delay or derail the investigation through judicial interference, the momentum they'd built could dissipate. Evidence might disappear. Witnesses could be pressured or bought off. The narrow window for justice might close entirely. That evening, after Mia was asleep, Ethan found Anna at the kitchen table surrounded by printouts of news articles about Richard Voss, Judge Winters, and the case. Her focus was intense, almost feverish, as she searched for connections or vulnerabilities. "You need to rest," he told her, setting a cup of tea by her papers. She looked up, fatigue evident in every line of her face. "I know how he thinks, Ethan. I can anticipate his next moves if I just find the pattern." Ethan gently gathered the papers, setting them aside despite her protests. "You're not responsible for stopping him single-handedly. There's an entire federal agency working on this now." "It's not enough," she insisted, reaching for the scattered documents. "You don't understand what he's capable of." Ethan caught her hands, holding them still between his own. "I understand that you've carried this burden alone for too long. You found the evidence. You brought it forward at enormous personal cost. You've done enough, Anna." The fight seemed to drain from her all at once. She slumped forward, her forehead resting against their joined hands. "I never had a contingency plan for after," she admitted, her voice muffled. "I was so focused on exposing the truth that I never thought about what would happen next, where I would go, who I would be." The vulnerability in her admission struck Ethan deeply. Behind the determined whistleblower was a 20-year-old who had just cut ties with everything and everyone she'd ever known. Her courage was remarkable, but the cost was enormous. "You'll be whoever you want to be," he told her softly, "and you'll stay with us for as long as you need." Anna looked up, her eyes searching his face for certainty. "Even after everything my father did to your family, even knowing who I am, especially knowing who you are, you chose justice over family loyalty, truth over comfort. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The moment between them stretched, charged with unspoken emotions. Anna's gaze dropped to their still joined hands, and Ethan became acutely aware of the intimacy of the gesture. He released her hands somewhat awkwardly, pushing back from the table. "We should both get some sleep," he said, retreating to safer conversational ground. "Tomorrow will be another long day." But sleep proved elusive for Ethan that night. His mind kept returning to the feel of Anna's hands in his, to the trust in her eyes when he'd promised she could stay. What exactly was he offering? What could he offer when their lives were in such chaos? Morning brought new complications. Agent Martinez arrived with news that Judge Winters had recused himself from the case, citing a previously undisclosed investment in a Voss Holdings subsidiary. The investigation would continue, but with inevitable delays as a new judge was assigned. "He got to Winters," Anna said flatly when told the news. "Just like I warned you he would." Martinez didn't disagree. We're adjusting our strategy. In the meantime, we need to move you again. A recused judge means potential information leaks about your location. Again, Ethan protested. Mia was just settling in here. She needs stability. What she needs is safety, Martinez countered. And right now, that means mobility. We have reason to believe Richard Voss has hired private security contractors to locate you. These aren't just bodyguards, Mr. Cole. These are former military with intelligence backgrounds. The implied threat didn't need elaboration. Richard Voss was escalating, moving beyond legal maneuvering to more direct methods. The safe house suddenly felt considerably less safe. Their next location was a high-rise apartment in downtown Pittsburgh, hiding in plain sight rather than in suburban isolation. The building had secure access, 24-hour doormen, and FBI agents posing as maintenance workers on their floor. The strategy, Martinez explained, was to make a potential abduction or attack logistically challenging in a building with so many potential witnesses. Mia, told they were moving to be closer to the special school she'd be attending, temporarily accepted the change with the adaptability of childhood. The apartment was nicer than their previous accommodations, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city. At night, the lights spread below them like an electric constellation. We lived in a place like this, once Anna told Mia, as they gazed out at the cityscape together. When I was about your age, my father bought the entire top floor of a building in New York. Was it pretty? Mia asked, her breath fogging the glass slightly. It was, Anna admitted. But I was lonely there. The rooms were so big and there was so much space between people. Not like your apartment, where everyone is close enough to hear each other breathe. Ethan, listening from the kitchen as he unpacked their meager belongings, was struck by the observation. Anna had grown up with every material advantage, yet she spoke of their cramped apartment with something like envy. What would it be like to have endless space and resources, but miss the simple intimacy of shared walls and overlapping lives? That night, a package arrived for them, delivered through FBI channels after thorough inspection. Inside were clothes, toys, and personal items from their apartment collected by Mrs. Chen and Dave. Tucked among Mia's things was a card signed by dozens of neighbors, expressing support and promising to watch over their home until they returned. The unexpected kindness brought tears to Ethan's eyes. For years after Hannah's death, he'd felt isolated in his grief, barely connecting with the community around him. Now faced with crisis, he discovered he hadn't been as alone as he'd thought. People had been watching, caring, waiting for an opportunity to help. Included with the package was a newspaper clipping, the business section featuring a photograph of Richard Voss entering Voss Holdings headquarters surrounded by reporters. The headline read, "Voss Empire Under Siege, Stock Plummets Amid Contamination Allegations." They published it, Ethan said, showing Anna the article. They're actually reporting on the allegations. Anna scanned the piece, her expression cautiously hopeful. The reporter mentioned 17 deaths linked to water contamination. They're taking it seriously. She looked up at him. This means others will come forward now. Former employees, local residents who experience symptoms. Once the dam breaks, the evidence will flood in. Her prediction proved accurate. Over the following days, news programs featured interviews with former Voss Holdings workers describing the company's environmental shortcuts. Local health officials released data showing unusual clusters of cardiac issues in neighborhoods surrounding the Raven Lake development. Journalists uncovered similar patterns at other Voss projects across 3 states. The story was growing beyond Anna's evidence, beyond Ethan's personal tragedy, becoming a nationwide scandal about corporate accountability and environmental justice. Richard Voss's carefully constructed public image as a visionary business leader was crumbling under the weight of mounting testimony. 10 days into their protective custody, Agent Martinez arrived with news that changed everything. "We've been authorized to offer you formal witness protection," she announced. "New identities, relocation, financial support, the full program." The prospect should have been reassuring, but Ethan felt only a cold weight settling in his stomach. Witness protection meant leaving Pittsburgh permanently. It meant Mia changing schools, losing the few connections to her mother that remained in their community. It meant Anna permanently severing any remaining ties to her past life. "Is this really necessary?" Ethan asked. "The case is building. Public opinion has turned against Voss. Surely once the trial starts, the trial could be years away," Martinez interrupted. "And Richard Voss's resources won't diminish during that time. If anything, he's growing more desperate. Our intelligence suggests he's liquidating overseas assets, potentially preparing for flight if the indictment comes through. What would witness protection mean for us practically, right? Anna asked, her analytical mind already processing the implications. New names, new backgrounds, relocation to another state, likely somewhere rural where you wouldn't be easily recognized. Full financial support until you're established. Martinez paused, her expression grave. But no contact with anyone from your previous lives. Not friends, not coworkers, not neighbors. That part is non-negotiable. The severity of the choice before them settled heavily in the room. Complete safety at the cost of complete disconnection. A new beginning that required ending everything else. How long do we have to decide, Ethan asked. 48 hours. We're moving forward with the grand jury next week. Your safety becomes an even higher priority once you're officially listed as witnesses. After Martinez left, Ethan and Anna sat in stunned silence. The reality of what they were facing, what they were asking Mia to face, was overwhelming. Eventually, Anna spoke, her voice strained. I've already lost my family. I can start over anywhere. But Mia, this is different for her. For you. Ethan shook his head. Don't do that. Don't separate yourself from us now. Whatever decision we make together. The three of us. The inclusion was deliberate, a confirmation of what they'd become through crisis. A unit, a family of choice rather than blood. Anna's eyes filled with tears at the simple declaration. That night, as Mia slept peacefully, unaware of the life-altering decision being weighed around her, Ethan and Anna sat on the balcony of the high-rise apartment. The city lights below them seemed both beautiful and threatening, the visible manifestation of the world they might soon leave behind. I keep thinking about Hannah, Ethan admitted, about what she would want for Mia, for me. What do you think she'd say? Anna asked softly. Ethan considered the question seriously. Hannah had been pragmatic but fiercely protective of their daughter. She would want safety first, certainly, but she had also believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. I think she'd tell us that running and hiding from injustice only guarantees it continues, he said finally. That showing Mia how to face difficult things honestly is more important than sheltering her from them. Anna nodded slowly. My mother used to say something similar before she left. That courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being scared, but doing what's right anyway. Your mother left. Ethan was surprised. Anna rarely mentioned her mother. When I was 12, she couldn't take my father's world anymore. The constant calculation of every relationship, the prioritizing of power over people. She tried to take me with her, but his lawyers were too good. She lost custody, lost everything. I haven't seen her in 8 years. The admission explains so much about Anna. Her determination to expose her father, her immediate connection with Mia, her understanding of loss. She had been fighting her own version of injustice long before Project Raven Lake ever crossed her path. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp ring of the secure phone the FBI had provided. At this late hour, it could only be Agent Martinez. Ethan answered, putting it on speaker so Anna could hear. Turn on the news, Martinez said without preamble. Channel 4. Now. They rushed inside, finding the remote and switching on the television. The screen showed helicopter footage of a mansion surrounded by police vehicles, their lights painting the manicured grounds in alternating red and blue. The headline banner read, Breaking FBI Raids Voss Estate, CEO reportedly attempting to flee country. The camera zoomed in on a figure being led out in handcuffs. Richard Voss himself still in what appeared to be pajamas and a bathrobe, his face contorted with fury as agents guided him into a waiting vehicle. What happened? Ethan asked, returning to the phone. One of his inner circle turned. Martinez explained, her voice tight with controlled excitement. His personal assistant came to us this afternoon with evidence that Voss was planning to leave for a non-extradition country tonight. We got an emergency warrant based on flight risk. During the arrest, agents discovered documents he was attempting to destroy. Additional evidence confirming his direct knowledge of the contamination and its health effects. He's in federal custody now. No bail. The implications were staggering. Richard Voss, untouchable billionaire corporate titan architect of countless lives' destruction, was sitting in a cell. The same justice system that had failed Hannah was finally working as it should. What does this mean for the witness protection decision? Anna asked, her mind immediately going to the practical consequences. There was a brief pause before Martinez answered. The threat level is significantly reduced with Voss in custody. We'll maintain protective details during the trial process, but full relocation may not be necessary now. We can discuss options in the morning. After the call ended, Ethan and Anna stood motionless before the television, watching reporters speculate about the case that had captivated the nation. The surreal nature of seeing their private tragedy transformed into breaking news was disorienting. This was justice in motion, yet it felt abstract, somehow disconnected from Hannah's absence at the dinner table or Mia's fatherless school events. Is it really over? Anna whispered as though afraid to believe it. Not over, Ethan replied, but beginning to end maybe. Morning brought frantic activity. News vans gathered outside their building, somehow having discovered their general location despite FBI precautions. Agent Martinez arrived with additional security personnel and updates on the case's rapid developments. The grand jury has been convened ahead of schedule, she informed them. With the new evidence recovered during the arrest, we're looking at multiple indictments. Not just Richard Voss, but several Voss Holdings executives who were complicit. The case has been prioritized at the highest levels of the Justice Department. The practical implications were significant. Anna and Ethan would need to testify sooner than expected. The media attention would intensify, but the prospect of witness protection had receded, replaced by more limited security measures during the trial process. We still think you should temporarily relocate, Martinez advised, just until the media circus dies down. We have a property about 2 hours from Pittsburgh, private, secure, but not isolated. You could stay there through the initial hearing phase, then reassess. Mia, emerging sleepy-eyed from her bedroom, immediately sensed the charged atmosphere. Are we moving again? She asked, her small shoulders slumping with the weight of constant change. Ethan knelt to her level, suddenly certain of what they needed to do. No, sweetheart. I think it's time we went home. To our real home. Martinez began to protest, but Anna stepped forward, her decision aligning with Ethan's, without words needed between them. We appreciate everything the FBI has done, she told the agent. But we can't keep running and hiding. Mia needs stability. We all do. We'll continue cooperating with the investigation, but from our own apartment with reasonable security measures. The declaration might have seemed naive from anyone else, but coming from Anna, who had risked everything to expose her father, it carried the weight of considered courage rather than recklessness. Martinez studied them both for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. I'll arrange for additional patrols in your neighborhood and panic buttons for the apartment. But I want to be clear about the risks. Richard Voss still has resources and connections, even from custody. There are other executives who may face charges based on your testimony. None of them will thank you for it. We understand, Ethan said, but we can't teach Mia to stand up for what's right if we're constantly running from the consequences of doing so. The decision made events move with surprising speed. By afternoon, they were back in their apartment building, greeted by neighbors who had formed an impromptu welcome committee in the lobby. Mrs. Chen had cleaned their apartment and stocked the refrigerator. Dave and the other delivery drivers had organized a schedule to ensure someone was always watching the building's entrance. The community had rallied around them in ways Ethan couldn't have imagined a month earlier. That evening, Mia fell asleep in her own bed for the first time in weeks, surrounded by her familiar possessions and the comfort of routine. Ethan found Anna in the kitchen, staring at the space where her silver Voss Holdings bracelet had once sat on the counter. She had left it behind when they evacuated to the safe house, a symbolic severing of ties with her father's empire. Do you regret it? He asked quietly, joining her at the counter. Coming forward, I mean. Giving up everything. Anna considered the question seriously. Not the decision itself, but I regret not seeing the truth sooner. All those years I accepted his explanations, his justifications. All those people who suffered while I enjoyed the benefits of his crimes. You were a child, Ethan reminded her. Children aren't responsible for their parents' actions. But we become responsible for what we do with the knowledge once we have it, she countered. That's what I've learned from you and Mia. That family isn't just who you're born to, but who you choose to become because of them or despite them. The insight struck Ethan as profound, coming from someone so young. Anna had lost the family of her birth, but gained something perhaps more valuable. The moral clarity that comes from choosing right over easy, truth over comfort. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a knock at the door, not the authoritative demand of Richard's security team, but a familiar neighbor's pattern. Dave stood in the hallway, his delivery uniform exchanged for casual clothes, his expression unusually serious. "You should see this," he said, holding out his phone. "It's already all over social media." The screen showed a press conference in progress. The Voss Holdings Board of Directors sat at a long table, their expressions somber, as the newly appointed interim CEO addressed the cameras. Effective immediately, Voss Holdings is establishing a fund for the families affected by the Raven Lake contamination. The initial contribution will be $1 billion dollars, with additional funds allocated as the full extent of damages is assessed. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators and implementing new environmental compliance standards across all our operations. The statement continued detailing corporate governance changes and remediation efforts, but the message was clear. Voss Holdings was attempting to distance itself from Richard Voss to salvage what remained of the company by acknowledging wrongdoing and offering compensation. They're throwing him overboard to save themselves. Anna observed a mixture of vindication and bitterness in her voice. "Does that help the families?" Dave asked. Like legally, Ethan and Anna exchanged glances. Neither was versed in the complexities of corporate liability, but the implications seemed significant. If the company was admitting culpability, the path to justice for all 17 families, not just those with direct connections to the investigation, might be clearer. "I think it means they know they can't win," Ethan said slowly. "They've seen the evidence, and they're cutting their losses." Dave nodded, satisfied with the assessment. "The whole building's talking about it. Mrs. Chen says she's organizing a celebration for tomorrow night. Sort of a justice for Hannah thing, if that's okay with you." The suggestion caught Ethan off guard. He'd been so focused on the legal case on keeping Mia safe that he hadn't considered what it might mean to publicly acknowledge the justice being sought in Hannah's name. The idea was both painful and cathartic. "I think she would have liked that," he said finally. "Hannah always believed in bringing people together." As Dave left, Ethan found himself drawn to the small collection of Hannah's photographs on the living room shelf. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed different now. Not just a reminder of loss, but a promise that truth would prevail, that her death would not be meaningless. Anna appeared beside him, studying the photographs with gentle reverence. "She was beautiful," Anna said softly. "Mia has her eyes." "And her determination," Ethan added. "Hannah never gave up on anything she believed in. Even when her health was failing, she kept fighting. For more time with Mia, for answers the doctors couldn't provide." Anna hesitated before asking the question that had clearly been on her mind. "Do you think she suspected?" About the contamination being the real cause, Ethan considered the possibility for the first time. Hannah had been a research librarian before Mia was born, meticulous about details and patterns. She had questioned her doctors repeatedly about the unusual progression of her symptoms, had researched similar cases in the area. "I think she knew something wasn't right," he acknowledged. "But the medical bills were overwhelming us, and then I lost my job and insurance. We were just trying to survive each day. There wasn't energy left for investigating." The admission carried its own weight of guilt. That perhaps if he'd listened more carefully to Hannah's concerns, if they'd pursued answers more aggressively, things might have ended differently. Anna seemed to sense his thoughts. "You did everything you could with the information you had," she said firmly. "That's all any of us can do. And now we're finishing what Hannah started. Finding the truth, holding the responsible parties accountable." Her words offered absolution Ethan hadn't realized he needed. The burden he'd carried since Hannah's death, the nagging sense that he should have done more, fought harder, found better doctors, wasn't entirely lifted, but it was shared now. Understood by someone who recognized that justice was rarely simple or swift. Outside their window, the night sky held the same stars that had witnessed Hannah's suffering, that had looked down on Richard Voss's crimes, that had seen Anna's courage in exposing the truth. For the first time in 2 years, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, not just surviving grief, but transforming it into something meaningful. Not just seeking justice, but creating a new kind of family from the broken pieces left behind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be testimony to give, media to navigate, perhaps even threats to face. But tonight in their small apartment, with its stubborn heater and thin walls, three people who had chosen each other against impossible odds were finally home. Not running, not hiding, but standing together to face whatever came next. In the bedroom down the hall, Mia slept peacefully, surrounded by paper cranes watching over her dreams. Each fold, each crease, a small act of creation. a tiny monument to possibility. One by one, they were accumulating toward that mythical thousand, toward a wish that might, against all odds, already becoming true. 3 months after Richard Voss's arrest, the grand jury convened on a Tuesday morning beneath Pittsburgh's steel gray sky. Storm clouds hung low over the city, refusing to break as Ethan Cole straightened his only tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror. The borrowed suit from Dave hung slightly loose on his frame, a physical reminder of the weight he'd lost during the stress of the past months. Each day had brought new revelations about the extent of the contamination, the corporate cover-up, and the lives destroyed in pursuit of profit. Today would mark his first formal testimony, the beginning of a process that would either deliver justice or reveal its limitations. In the courthouse hallway, Anna waited with Mia, both dressed in simple but formal attire. Anna had abandoned her previous style, entirely donating her expensive clothes and adopting a wardrobe that reflected her new reality. Practical, unassuming, honest. The silver bracelet with the Voss Holdings logo was long gone, replaced by a woven paper chain Mia had crafted for her from origami paper, now worn smooth from constant contact with her skin. "You ready?" Anna asked as Ethan approached her, eyes searching his face for signs of doubt or fear. He nodded, taking Mia's hand. Their small family unit had been a constant source of media fascination. The single father, his daughter, and the billionaire's daughter who had chosen them over fortune. Photographers lurked outside the courthouse, hoping to capture images for the countless articles, documentaries, and news segments being produced about the case. Agent Martinez had arranged for them to enter through a secure doorway, avoiding the worst of the media gauntlet. Inside the courtroom, Ethan was struck by its imposing formality. The high ceilings, polished wood, and somber atmosphere designed to convey the weight of law. In the front row of the gallery sat 17 framed photographs, one for each victim of the Raven Lake contamination. The display had been organized by the victims' families, a visual reminder of what this case was truly about. Hannah's photograph was centered among them, her smile a silent witness to the proceedings. Richard Voss sat at the defense table in an impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to the orange jumpsuit he'd worn during his initial arraignment. Despite 3 months in federal custody awaiting trial, he still projected an aura of entitlement, as though his current situation were merely a temporary inconvenience. When he turned and caught sight of Anna, his expression hardened into something unreadable. Not quite hatred, not quite desperation, but a complex mixture of both. Ethan's testimony began simply enough, establishing his employment history at Voss Holdings, the circumstances of his termination, and the timeline of Hannah's illness. But as the questioning deepened, as he described watching his wife's health deteriorate, while medical bills mounted and insurance claims were denied, the clinical atmosphere of the courtroom gave way to something more human. Several jurors wiped away tears as Ethan recounted Mia asking why doctors couldn't fix her mommy like they fixed her broken arm the year before. Throughout his testimony, Ethan felt Richard Voss's gaze on him, calculating, assessing, searching for weaknesses. But where once that corporate stare had intimidated warehouse employees, now it met the steady resolve of a fatherer with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. When Anna took the stand the following day, the courtroom was filled beyond capacity. Her testimony had been anticipated not just for its evidentiary value, but for its dramatic potential. The daughter testifying against her father in one of the largest corporate criminal cases in decades. Anna approached the witness stand with quiet dignity, her voice steady as she was sworn in. For nearly 6 hours, she methodically dismantled the fiction that Richard Voss had been unaware of the contamination. She traced document trails, identified his signature on approval forms, and quoted verbatim from meetings she had witnessed where the acceptable casualty rate was discussed as a simple business expense. Each revelation landed like a physical blow, the jury's expressions shifting from shock to disgust to resolve. In the face of his daughter's damning testimony, Richard Voss remained outwardly composed, whispering occasionally to his defense team. Only when Anna described discovering Hannah Cole's death certificate, connecting the abstract corporate decision to a specific human life, did his facade crack momentarily, a flash of genuine emotion crossing his features before being carefully suppressed. "My father taught me that power means never having to face consequences," Anna stated clearly, her eyes meeting Richard's directly for the first time. "But living with Ethan and Mia taught me that real power comes from doing what's right, even when it costs you everything." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to paint Anna as a mentally unstable daughter, seeking revenge for childhood grievances. The questions probed her personal life, her academic history, her relationships, anything to discredit her character, rather than addressing the evidence she had presented. Isn't it true, Miss Voss, the attorney asked with calculated precision, that you've had a history of emotional instability, that you've been in therapy since you were 14, that you've had conflicts with your father throughout your adolescence? Anna's response was measured. Yes, I've been in therapy. When you grow up watching your father calculate the dollar value of human lives, emotional support becomes necessary. And yes, we had conflicts, usually when I questioned the ethics of his business practices. The answer silenced the courtroom. Even the judge seemed momentarily taken aback by her candor. The defense attorney, sensing his approach was backfiring, quickly shifted tactics. As days of testimony became weeks, a pattern emerged. The prosecution built an airtight case connecting Richard Voss directly to the contamination decisions. The defense, unable to refute the documentary evidence, focused instead on diluting responsibility, arguing that corporate decisions were collective, that environmental standards were unclear, that causation between the chemicals and specific deaths couldn't be definitively established. Throughout it all, life at the apartment continued in its new normal. Mia returned to regular school attendance, supported by teachers and classmates who had been briefed on the unusual circumstances. Neighbors maintained their informal security network, checking in regularly and reporting any suspicious activity near the building. Mrs. Chen became a de facto grandmother figure to Mia, teaching her to make dumplings, while Ethan and Anna attended court sessions. The media remained obsessed with their story, particularly the evolving relationship between Ethan and Anna. Speculation ran rampant about whether their partnership was romantic or merely circumstantial. Neither confirmed nor denied the rumors, maintaining a united front of privacy around their personal lives while being transparent about the case itself. In truth, their connection had deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Shared purpose had evolved into mutual respect, then genuine affection, then something more complex, a bond forged through crisis but sustained through choice. They moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of family anticipating needs, sharing responsibilities, creating stability for Mia amid the chaos of the trial. Late one evening, returning from a particularly grueling day of testimony, they found Mia and Mrs. Chen at the kitchen table, surrounded by a riot of colored paper. Mia looked up with excitement, holding aloft a delicate paper crane more perfectly formed than any she had created before. Look, I made the 1,000th one. Mrs. Chen helped me count them all. The milestone hit them both with unexpected emotional force. Months ago, Anna had casually mentioned the Japanese legend that folding 1,000 paper cranes would grant a wish. Throughout the chaos that followed, the revelations, the threats, the legal battles, Mia had quietly persisted, one crane at a time, building toward a wish she had kept secret. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, kneeling beside his daughter. Mia's expression grew serious. "I can't say out loud or it won't come true, but I wrote it down and put it inside the 1,000th crane." She handed the delicate paper bird to Anna. "You keep it. It's safer with you." The trust implicit in the gesture, entrusting her most precious wish to Anna's safekeeping, spoke volumes about how their lives had intertwined. That night, after Mia was asleep, Anna carefully placed the 1,000th crane in a small glass display box on the living room shelf, positioning it beside Hannah's photograph. "Do you think we should open it?" she asked Ethan quietly, "to see what she wished for?" He shook his head, understanding instinctively that some things were meant to remain private, even between parents and children. Some magic required the protection of secrecy. 6 weeks into the trial, the prosecution rested its case. The defense, rather than beginning their presentation, requested a brief recess. When court reconvened the following morning, Richard Voss's lead attorney approached the bench with an unexpected announcement. "Your Honor, in light of the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution, my client wishes to change his plea." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Plea negotiations were common in criminal cases, but for a defendant of Richard Voss's stature to abandon his not guilty plea mid-trial was unprecedented. It suggested either a complete collapse of his defense strategy or a calculated decision to cut his losses. The details of the plea agreement emerged gradually over the next 2 days. Richard Voss would plead guilty to multiple counts of negligent homicide, environmental crimes, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. In exchange, prosecutors would recommend a sentence of 30 years rather than life imprisonment. Voss Holdings would establish a $5 billion compensation fund for victims' families and affected communities, and Richard would surrender all personal assets derived from the contaminated properties. Ethan and Anna were summoned to the prosecutor's office to review the terms before they were finalized. Agent Martinez accompanied them, her professional demeanor giving way to cautious satisfaction at what the plea represented. "This is a win," she told them plainly. "A big one. We get justice for the victims without subjecting their families to years of appeals. We get financial compensation that will make a real difference in affected communities. And we get a precedent-setting case that sends a message to every corporate board in America." But Ethan couldn't help feeling there was something missing, some element of accountability that a plea agreement, no matter how punitive, failed to deliver. "He never has to say it, does he?" he observed quietly. "He never has to look the families in the eye and admit what he did. He never has to speak Hannah's name." The prosecutor exchanged glances with Agent Martinez, clearly having anticipated this concern. "That's why we added a specific condition to the agreement," she explained. "Richard Voss must make a full public statement of responsibility at his sentencing hearing. Not a generic corporate apology, but a detailed acknowledgement of the harm caused to each victim identified by name. It's non-negotiable." Anna, who had been silently reviewing the document, looked up with surprise. "He agreed to that, to publicly name his victims. His attorneys fought it hard," the prosecutor admitted. "But in the end, he accepted the term. I suspect he calculated that 30 years at his age is effectively a life sentence anyway. So the personal humiliation was worth the technical reduction in prison time." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month, giving the court time to process victim impact statements and complete the formal plea agreement. During this interim period, Ethan, Anna, and Mia experienced their first taste of something approximating normal life since the investigation began. The constant security details were reduced to occasional check-ins. Media interest, while still significant, shifted from daily coverage to periodic updates. Ethan began exploring job opportunities, his newfound status as a corporate whistleblower ironically making him attractive to companies seeking to burnish their ethical credentials. Anna enrolled in environmental law courses at the local university, channeling her experience into formal education that might prevent similar tragedies in the future. One unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, as Ethan and Anna walked Mia home from school, they were stopped by an elderly woman they didn't recognize. Her eyes were red-rimmed from recent tears, her hands trembling slightly as she approached them. "My son was David Kim," she said without preamble. "He worked in shipping at the warehouse. He died 3 years ago from what the doctors called an unusual cardiac condition." Ethan recognized the name immediately from the list of 17 victims. David had worked one department over from him, a quiet, efficient employee who had sometimes shared lunch breaks with Ethan in the warehouse cafeteria. "I remember him," Ethan said gently. "He was a good man, always showed me pictures of his kids." The woman nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I wanted to thank you, both of you, for making sure he wasn't just a number on some corporate spreadsheet, for giving our family answers we thought we'd never have." Before either could respond, she pressed something into Anna's hands, a small carved wooden box. Inside was a family photograph showing David Kim surrounded by his wife, children, and his mother. On the back was written simply, "Justice matters. Thank you for fighting for ours." The encounter, brief as it was, crystallized what they had been fighting for all along. Not abstract principles of corporate accountability or environmental regulation, but real people with real lives that had been cut short by calculated greed. The wooden box joined the 1,000th crane and Hannah's photograph on the shelf, a growing collection of talismans marking their journey. As the sentencing date approached, Ethan and Mia faced another milestone, the second anniversary of Hannah's death. In previous years, the day had been marked by private grief, by flowers placed at her grave, by quiet tears, as Mia looked through photo albums of the mother she was gradually forgetting. This year felt different, not less painful, but somehow more purposeful. The three of them visited the cemetery together, Anna hanging back slightly to give Ethan and Mia their private moment at Hannah's headstone. Mia carefully placed a bouquet of origami flowers she had folded from colorful paper, arranging them with solemn concentration. "Mom," She said, addressing the headstone directly, "We found out why you got sick, and the bad man who did it is going to jail. Anna helped us. She's living with us now. I think you would like her." The simplicity of the statement, the childlike certainty that justice had been served, that Hannah would approve of their unusual family arrangement, brought fresh tears to Ethan's eyes. He glanced back at Anna, finding her watching them with an expression of such careful respect for their grief, such conscious awareness of her place as both insider and outsider to this moment, that something shifted in his heart. Later that evening, after Mia was asleep, Ethan found Anna on their small balcony, gazing at the night sky with a thoughtful expression that had become so familiar to him. "Thank you for today," he said, joining her at the railing, "for understanding that we needed that time." She nodded, still looking upward at the scattered stars visible despite the city lights. "I was thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I was living in my father's mansion, surrounded by wealth I didn't earn, planning how to expose crimes I didn't commit. Now I'm here, part of a family I never expected to have, about to watch my father be sentenced for murders that can never be undone." The complexity of her position, both defendant's daughter and victim's advocate, had never been lost on Ethan. The courage it had taken for her to choose this path, to sacrifice everything familiar for what was right, continued to humble him. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked quietly. Anna finally turned to look at him, her expression clear and certain. "Not for a second. I regret that it took me so long to see the truth. I regret that I can't bring Hannah back to you and Mia. But finding you both becoming part of your lives, that I could never regret." The honesty between them had always been their foundation, from that first difficult conversation when she revealed her true identity to the countless late nights preparing testimony and processing grief. But there had been an unspoken boundary too, a careful distance maintained out of respect for Hannah's memory, for Mia's adjustment, for the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. Standing on the balcony under the same stars that had witnessed so much of their journey, that boundary felt suddenly arbitrary, unnecessary. Ethan reached for Anna's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that acknowledged what they had both been feeling, that their connection had evolved beyond shared purpose into something deeper, something worth naming. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever sentence he receives, we've already won," he told her softly. "We found the truth. We found justice. And somehow in the middle of all that, we found each other." Anna's response wasn't verbal, but a gentle leaning into his side, her head resting against his shoulder as they continued gazing at the night sky. They remained that way for a long time, no further words needed between them, the comfortable silence of people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and chosen to stay. The sentencing hearing dawned clear and cold, the courthouse steps already filled with reporters and spectators hours before proceedings were scheduled to begin. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation, not for the sentence itself, which had been largely predetermined by the plea agreement, but for Richard Voss's required statement of responsibility. Would he show genuine remorse? Would he acknowledge the human cost of his actions? Or would he deliver a carefully crafted statement designed to meet the technical requirements while avoiding true accountability? Ethan and Anna were seated in the front row of the gallery, directly behind the prosecution table. The 17 photographs were again displayed prominently, ensuring that even in a proceeding focused on the defendant, the victims remained visible and central. Mia had chosen to stay with Mrs. Chen, both agreeing that the courtroom was no place for a child, even one as resilient as she had proven to be. When Richard Voss entered, the change in his appearance was striking. 3 months in federal detention had diminished him physically, the tailored suit now hanging somewhat loose on his frame, his complexion paler, his imperious posture slightly stooped. Yet his eyes retained their calculating sharpness as they swept the courtroom, lingering briefly on Anna before focusing on the judge. The formal aspects of the sentencing proceeded according to protocol. The reading of charges, the confirmation of the guilty plea, the presentation of the agreed-upon terms. Then came the moment the crowded courtroom had been waiting for. "Mr. Voss," the judge addressed him directly, "before I pronounce sentence, the terms of your plea agreement require you to make a full statement of responsibility regarding the harm caused by your actions. Please proceed." Richard Voss stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket in a reflexive gesture of corporate presentation. For a moment, Ethan feared they would hear only carefully scripted legalese words drafted by attorneys to fulfill the letter of the requirement while avoiding genuine accountability. But when Richard began speaking, his voice held an unexpected quality, the strained tone of a man forcing himself to face what he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Your Honor, he began, I stand before this court having pleaded guilty to crimes that cannot be undone, harm that cannot be repaired, and losses that cannot be restored. For most of my career, I viewed business decisions through the lens of profit and loss, reducing human considerations to numerical values on spreadsheets. He paused, seeming to gather himself before continuing. The Raven Lake project was initially conceived as a standard real estate development. When environmental testing revealed contamination issues that would have reduced property values, I made a decision that I justified to myself as simple business strategy, to proceed without proper remediation, to conceal the data, and to eliminate potential whistleblowers through strategic layoffs. The clinical description gave way to something more specific as he continued. What I failed to acknowledge was that these were not abstract decisions, but choices that directly harmed real people with real lives. Hannah Cole, a wife and mother whose medical care was compromised when her husband lost his job and insurance. Maria Santos, a single mother of 3, whose children are now orphaned. David Kim, whose elderly mother lost her primary support. One by one, he named all 17 victims, providing specific details about each, not just how they died, but who they had been in life, what dreams had been cut short, what families had been shattered. The comprehensiveness of the accounting suggested this was not merely a statement prepared by attorneys, but a genuine reckoning with the human cost of his actions. When he reached the conclusion of his statement, Richard Voss did something entirely unexpected. He turned away from the judge to face the gallery, directly, his eyes finding Ethan and Anna in the front row. To the families represented here today, no apology can suffice. No sentence, regardless of length, can balance the scales of justice. I do not ask for forgiveness, as what I have done is unforgivable. I ask only that you know that I finally see, truly see, the lives I destroyed, and that this knowledge will be my true prison long after any sentence this court imposes. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as he returned his attention to the judge. Whatever calculation might have motivated his plea agreement, whatever legal strategy had shaped his defense in this moment, Richard Voss had done something few had expected. He had acknowledged not just his legal culpability, but his moral responsibility. The judge proceeded with formal sentencing. 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole surrender, of personal assets estimated at over $4 billion, lifetime prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any public company. The terms were severe by any standard, effectively ensuring that Richard Voss would spend the remainder of his life paying for his crimes. As court officers led him away, Richard paused briefly beside the gallery rail where Ethan and Anna sat. For a moment, father and daughter looked at each other without words, not in reconciliation or forgiveness, but in simple acknowledgement of the truth that now stood between them. Then he was gone, disappearing through the side door that led back to detention, leaving behind the empire he had built and the destruction he had caused. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, cameras tracking Ethan and Anna as they emerged into the bright afternoon sunlight. Rather than pushing through the crowd or seeking the privacy of the arranged security transport, Anna stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, her hand finding Ethan's in a gesture that did not go unnoticed by the assembled media. Justice was served today, she said simply. Not just for our family, but for all 17 families who lost loved ones to corporate greed. No sentence can bring them back, but the truth is finally on record and the accountability is real. A reporter called out from the crowd, "Miss Voss, do you have any personal statement about your father's sentencing?" Anna considered the question before responding with careful precision. My father made choices that prioritized profit over human lives. Today he faced the consequences of those choices, as we all eventually must. My hope is that other corporate leaders will learn from this case that environmental crimes have human victims, that regulatory violations have real costs, and that no amount of wealth or power places anyone above the law. Her response was neither vindictive nor emotional, but measured and principled, focused on the larger implications rather than personal grievances. It reflected the woman she had become through this ordeal, someone who understood that justice wasn't about vengeance, but about truth, accountability, and prevention of future harm. As they made their way through the media gauntlet to the waiting car, a final question rang out. What happens to you now? Will you continue living with Mr. Cole and his daughter? Anna paused, looking to Ethan with a question in her eyes. How much of their private life were they willing to share? His slight nod gave her permission to answer honestly. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, she said. It's created through choices we make every day. To support each other, to face difficult truths together, to build something meaningful from broken pieces. Ethan and Mia are my family now in every way that matters. The statement broadcast across news platforms nationwide within hours put a formal end to speculation about their living arrangement. What had begun as a temporary rental agreement, complicated by revelations and threats, had evolved into a deliberate choice to build a life together. Not despite their difficult beginning, but because of the strength they had discovered through it. Returning to the apartment, they found Mia and Mrs. Chen waiting anxiously for news. The television was already playing coverage of the sentencing, but Mia had been more interested in completing her latest origami project, a complex mobile of interconnected paper cranes designed to hang from her bedroom ceiling. Is it really over? She asked as they entered, her young face serious beyond her years. Ethan knelt to her level, choosing his words carefully. The court part is over. Your mom got justice today. But remembering her, honoring what she taught us, that part is never over. Mia nodded, processing this with the remarkable resilience she had shown throughout their ordeal. Then she turned to Anna with unexpected directness. Are you staying with us forever now? The question, simple yet profound, hung in the air between them. Anna glanced at Ethan, seeking guidance or permission, but this was a moment for her own truth. If that's what you want, she told Mia gently, if that's what you both want, this is your home, and I would never presume you belong here, Mia interrupted with childlike certainty. You helped fix what was broken. And Dad smiles again when you're around. The observation, delivered with the unfiltered honesty of childhood, brought color to both adults' cheeks. Mrs. Chen, witnessing the moment, made a diplomatic exit to the kitchen, muttering about checking on dumplings that needed attention. Left in momentary privacy, Ethan found himself facing Anna with new clarity. They had been circling this conversation for weeks, perhaps months. The question of what came next, of what their relationship was becoming beyond the crisis that had forged it. She's right, he said quietly, about the smiling. Anna's eyes met his vulnerability, and hope mingled in equal measure. We built something here in the middle of all this chaos. Something real. I don't want to lose that when the headlines fade and life goes back to whatever normal becomes. We won't. Ethan promised, reaching for her hand. Some things once found can't be lost again. Some choices once made define everything that follows. In the weeks and months that followed, life gradually found a new rhythm. The media eventually turned to other stories, though the case remained a landmark in corporate criminal prosecution, studied in law schools, and cited in regulatory reforms. The settlement money established not only compensation for victims' families, but also a foundation dedicated to environmental justice in underserved communities. Ethan accepted a position with a manufacturing company known for its ethical practices, his firsthand experience with corporate wrongdoing making him valuable in developing accountability protocols. Anna completed her environmental law courses and began working with nonprofit organizations that help communities affected by industrial contamination. Together, they turned personal tragedy into purposeful advocacy. 1 year after Richard Voss's sentencing, City Hall hosted a press conference announcing the establishment of the Hannah Cole Memorial Clean Water Initiative, a program funding independent water safety monitoring in low-income communities nationwide. The initiative would use a portion of the Voss Holdings settlement funds to ensure that what happened at Raven Lake could never happen again without detection and immediate intervention. Anna stood at the podium beside the mayor, no longer defined primarily as Richard Voss's daughter, but as an advocate in her own right. She wore a simple blue dress and the paper chain bracelet Mia had made her, now weathered from a year of daily wear. Ethan and Mia stood in the front row, watching with pride as she addressed the gathered officials and community members. When it came time for formal remarks, Anna didn't deliver a standard speech about regulations or funding mechanisms. Instead, she reached into her purse and withdrew 3 simple objects that told their story more eloquently than words could have. First, the small wooden key Mia had carved for her in art class, the one that said home in a child's careful lettering. Anna placed it gently on the podium microphone. Second, the original handwritten rental receipt Ethan had given her that first day, now framed and worn from handling. She set it beside the key. Finally, the glass case containing the thousandth paper crane, its wings still spread wide in eternal flight. She placed it carefully atop the other items. When we began this journey, we were strangers brought together by circumstances beyond our control. Anna said, her voice steady and clear. What we discovered was that justice isn't just about courts and sentencing. It's about choosing truth over comfort, principle over profit, and love over fear. It's about building family from broken pieces and finding home in unexpected places. As cameras flashed capturing the moment that would become symbolic of their story, Ethan felt a small hand slip into his. Mia looked up at him with Hannah's eyes and smiled with newfound peace. She didn't have to tell us what she wished for, she whispered, nodding toward the thousandth crane in its glass case. It came true anyway. Ethan followed her gaze to where Anna stood at the podium, the sunlight catching her face as she continued speaking about water safety and community responsibility. The woman who had entered their lives as a tenant with secrets had become their anchor, their advocate, their family. After the ceremony, the three of them walked home together to the same apartment where it had all started. The room for rent sign was long gone, replaced by a small plaque that Mia had helped design. It read simply, Cole family founded in truth. Are we really keeping my last name? Anna asked as they approached the building, the question a familiar refrain that had become something of a private joke between them. Ethan smiled, unlocking the door with the key Mia had copied for him from her wooden carving. Family isn't about names. It's about choosing to stay when staying gets hard. Inside their apartment had transformed over time, not through expensive renovations, but through the accumulated evidence of lives intertwined. Hannah's photographs remain prominently displayed, joined now by new images of their expanded family. Mia's origami creations hung from light fixtures and doorways. Anna's art supplies had migrated from her room to shared spaces no longer hidden, but integrated into their daily existence. That evening, Mrs. Chen joined them for dinner, along with Dave and several neighbors who had become close friends during their ordeal. As conversation flowed around the crowded table, Ethan found moments to observe this unlikely gathering, the community that had formed around them in crisis and remained in celebration. Mrs. Chen was demonstrating a new dumpling folding technique to Mia, her hands guiding the child's with surprising gentleness. Dave was regaling Anna with stories from his delivery route. His previous awkwardness around her completely vanished. Everyone present had been transformed by what they'd witnessed and the roles they had played in seeking justice. Small acts of solidarity had become lasting bonds of friendship. Later, as the guests departed and Mia settled into bed, surrounded by her paper creations, Ethan stood at the window watching the city lights come alive against the darkening sky. Anna joined him, slipping her arm around his waist with the easy affection that had developed between them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't rented your room? She asked quietly. Ethan considered the question. The truth would have stayed buried. Hannah and the others would have remained statistics. Richard would still be adding to his billions. And we'd all be strangers passing each other on the street, never knowing what we might have meant to each other. Anna nodded slowly. It's strange to think that something so good could come from something so terrible. That doesn't make what happened any less tragic, but it means the tragedy doesn't get the final word. In the bedroom down the hall, Mia had begun softly singing to herself, a lullaby Hannah had once sung, now passed on through memory and love rather than blood. The sound carried through the apartment, a reminder that loss wasn't the end of the story, but rather the beginning of a different one. Grief remained as it always would. Hannah's absence was a permanent alteration to his heart's geography. But alongside it had grown something he hadn't believed possible. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new constellation of connections, purpose, and love that honored her memory by embracing life's unexpected turns. 6 months later, a smaller, more private ceremony took place at the courthouse downtown. In a simple civil proceeding, witnessed by Mrs. Chen Dave and an excited Mia, Anna legally became Anna Cole. The adoption papers acknowledged what they had known for months. That family was created through choice and commitment rather than mere circumstance of birth. On the courtroom steps afterward, Mia released a flock of paper cranes into the air, not the precious thousand that had earned her wish, but new ones folded specifically for this occasion. As they fluttered and danced on the breeze, Ethan was reminded of Anna's words from a year earlier. Justice isn't just about courts and sentencing. True justice, he had come to understand, wasn't merely the punishment of wrongdoing, but the restoration of what had been broken. Not just Richard Voss in prison, but communities made whole. Not just compensation for victims, but honoring their memory through meaningful change. Not just exposing a corporation's crimes, but creating a family bound by truth and courage. Sometimes the most expensive room wasn't in a mansion. Sometimes it was the $200 space where someone finally learned what home really meant. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance wasn't money or power. It was the courage to choose family over fortune, truth over comfort, and love over everything else. The story that had begun with a desperate room for rent sign had transformed into something none of them could have imagined. A tenant had become a daughter, a witness had become a partner, a tragedy had become a catalyst for justice. And three strangers brought together by corporate crime and human courage had become something that even Richard Voss's billions could never buy. A family forged in fire, tempered by truth and bound by love, that had chosen them as much as they had chosen it. As they walked home together under the open sky, Mia skipping ahead with childlike joy, Anna's hand firmly clasped in Ethan's, the future stretched before them. Not perfect or painless, but honest and hopeful. The path that had begun with Hannah's death had not ended with Richard's imprisonment, but continued forward into a life none of them had expected, but all of them had chosen day by day, fold by fold. In a society that often measured worth by wealth and success by power, they had discovered a different kind of accounting. One that valued truth over convenience, justice over advantage, and the tender bonds of chosen family over the cold calculations of corporate profit. It was a lesson hard won, but worth everything it had cost them. A lesson that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they had rewritten the ending to a story that had begun in tragedy. Not by erasing the pain or pretending it hadn't happened, but by refusing to let it define them. By insisting against all odds that what breaks us can also be what remakes us into something stronger, truer, and more beautiful than we ever imagined possible.